Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Proven Guilty by Jim Butcher, which is Dresden Files Book 8. It's been a hot minute since I read anything Dresden Files. I'm coming back to this after sort of a 3, maybe even a 4-month break, so sorry for all the people who've been waiting for me to re-pick up my Dresden reviews. They should be more regular from here. In this review, I'll try my best not to completely ruin this book, but I will be referring back to stuff that happened in the previous 7 books, so there will be spoilers for that. If you're not up to this point or past this point, maybe don't watch this review. As we know by now, the series follows Harry Dresden, private investigator, wizard, special investigations consultant for the Chicago PD, and as of the last book, a warden of the White Council, one of the wizard law enforcement responsible for exacting justice, however much he may or may not agree with what that justice means. We jump in at the start of the book. Immediately, Harry has a lot on his plate, as is the Dresden Files norm. The war between the Red Vampire Court and the White Council is still raging, both on the mortal plane and in the fairy realm, exacting huge numbers of casualties on both sides. But the fairy queens of summer and winter have not moved on the Red Court, and Ebenezer McCoy, Harry's old master, tasks him with finding out why, because Harry has a history with the fairies. The gatekeeper of the council asks Harry to investigate the use of dangerous black magic somewhere in Chicago. And on top of this, Harry is contacted by Molly Carpenter, the daughter of one of his best friends, Michael, to bail her boyfriend out of jail. He's soon investigating a horror movie convention, the site of gruesome murders, and tracks the perpetrators back to Arctis Tor, the fairy stronghold of the Winter Queen. Dresden feels, as in the last book, a lot more emotionally mature, maybe even a bit disenchanted. He's really starting to see, as well as bad guys and good guys, the sort of undercurrent of injustice and ambiguity on both sides of each conflict. He knows the people he answers to, legally has to answer to, aren't the people he wants them to be. And there's a lot of internal questions going on for him. The lines between good and evil really are blurring. And although the stories do still have the hunt down and kill the monster bit, they're definitely getting more morally and ethically complicated. Despite there being lots of stories interwoven in this one, like most Dresden books, this one felt like a story in 2 parts, with a sort of midway interlude, which honestly, for me, made the story feel bigger. The first half of the book was definitely more police procedural, and the second half was a lot more wizardy, which makes me think that further down the line, Harry is going to be forced to choose between these 2 aspects of his life. Having really missed Murphy in the last book, I'm so glad that this book was Murphy heavy. She's back. Even though I'm not sure where the story's going with her, in terms of the character cast, we do get a few threats introduced. We also pick back up with the Summer Lady, the Summer Knight. The main focus of this book, though, is Michael's family, making them into real 3-dimensional people rather than the backdrop for Michael that they've been up to this point. Considering that a lot of this book revolves around Harry and his churchy, religious-y friends, one of the big conflicts in this book is between Harry and his internal Black and Denarian fallen angel parasite. Heavy spoiler territory now. The first half of this book was Harry tracking down and killing the phobophages, the fetches that are haunting the horror movie convention. And we had these real supernatural creatures that are taking the form of movie monsters, which is something that's cheesy enough that I felt that could have happened in like the first 2 or 3 Dresden books. I loved it though, it did make sense in the story. It let the author put these pop culture references in too, which was fantastic. I have one gripe though with that whole bit. It's a tiny thing, but for me it was massive. You have scenes where the author is very clearly describing Jason Voorhees, or Michael Myers. This one, not that one. Scenes where the author is describing Alien from Alien, the xenomorph, but never uses the explicit names of them, maybe to avoid copyright infringement. But there was one scene where a little ginger doll with a big knife runs at one of the characters, and they call it Bucky the Murder Doll, which sort of implied for me that this is set in a universe that's not my own and kind of killed the immersion a little bit. Like in a story where somebody says McFonald's instead of McDonald's. Don't know, it just felt weird. In terms of character exploration, the star of this book really is Charity. Up to this point, she's just been someone who hates Dresden because he's a troublemaker. You have this image of her as an overprotective mother. But here we really get an insight into what makes her think Dresden is some kind of evil temptation force that's going to ruin her life, tear apart her family. You get a proper look at her backstory, and you really can, to some extent, sympathise with her. Michael is far away in this book. He's off on one of his god missions. The fact that the Dresden charity relationship moved to one of respect in this book makes you kind of think that the reason Michael was called away was to facilitate this. While we're on the topic of religions, you have Dresden mention other gods to Charity, to which she snaps back, there's only one god. I'd really like to know how other existing real-world religions sort of fit into Dresden's worldview and systems of magic. He spends a lot of time around his Christian friends, isn't sure where he stands in terms of faith, but does he see Christianity as like the religion, the true one, considering that he has had contact with angels? I'd like to know what Dresden's opinions are on stuff like Hinduism and Shinto that worship something totally different than the people around him worship. I kind of hope that comes up at some point. I'm interested. I hope they're not ignored. Fantasy stuff a lot of it does tend to revolve around Abrahamic religions. We also get a bit deeper, I guess, into the relationship between Harry and Murphy. There seem to be really mixed feelings here. Dresden clearly has some attraction to Murphy, and her to him, but obviously work is in the way. At first, when I was reading this, I was like, about the fact that his feelings for Susan Rodriguez have kind of fallen to the wayside, and he'd just forgotten her. But I think that's a symptom of me having read all these books so close together, and not as and when they came out, because actually, since Susan became a vampire, it's been 5 years. They were properly together a long time ago. And I think it's easy to forget about time passing in a series like this. One of the things I really like about this book is that it ties the fairies into the main conflict. It would be so easy to introduce fairies as something cool, have an insular adventure with them, and then never touch them again. It would be easy to make them sort of aloof, above the war, as they've been up to this point, but now they are 100% dragged in. And it looks like they've been dragged into the conflict by Denarians 2, with Harry smelling and sensing the use of hellfire in Arctis Tour. It seems like somebody is really stirring the pot, trying to get every single big power to throw itself into the same conflict. Interesting. Very interesting. A problem that it seems like a lot of people have with this book is the sexualization of Molly, who is 17, with Harry sort of almost perving over her, beating himself up about his feelings. It's a small part of the book, but I do feel it was kind of weird, considering at this point, Harry's like 32, I think, almost old enough to be her dad. Just some other questiony, prediction-y bits at the end. Stuff I think might happen, stuff I'm interested to know. Michael saying he can feel he's going to pass the sword on soon. Somehow I don't think he's going to die, but find a new bearer who maybe needs it for something else to complete a task. Madrigal Wraith, Thomas's cousin, looks at Mouse and says, "That's not a dog," but does not elaborate. Does he know something extra about Mouse, about that breed that Harry doesn't, or was that just a throwaway, exaggerate-y line? Also, on the topic of Madrigal, is Harry picking a fight with Madrigal publicly, and Thomas, aggravating House Wraith, going to drag the Whites into the war? Also, still on Madrigal, he feeds on fear where Thomas feeds on lust or sexual energy. How much variation among white vampires is there? Speaking about mechanics of creatures, it's very unclear about Lassiel in a lot of ways. Harry seems to be under the impression that contact with the coin made an imprint of Lassiel's personality in his head, but it gives him information that Harry would have no way of knowing. So clearly it has all or some of the memories of Lassiel. If this much is in Harry's head already, if Harry can't get her to sort off, if she can already call up this amount of power for Harry to use, tell Harry everything she knows as a fallen angel, and manipulate Harry, what else will picking up the coin and carrying it around actually do? I think the book's trying to misdirect me into thinking that the corruption on the council is Merlin, but I don't think it is. I think the book just wants me to think that. It could just as easily be the gatekeeper. I really hope it's not McCoy. I'll be sad if he turns out to be a bad guy. His and Harry's relationship has taken enough hits over the last few years, and they just seem to be sort of ironing it out, getting back to normal. Who fixed Little Chicago? I have no idea who could possibly have gotten into his apartment and changed his model. Raises a lot of questions about his assumed security. Who would be strong enough to do that? Lastly, what's the deal with Lee? We ask that question a lot in these reviews. Why was she trapped in the fountain? What's her long game? Why did she have Mab's eyes? What's the promise she made to Dresden's mum? We still don't know what's happening with the knife from last time. Many questions and thoughts. I like this book a lot. I didn't like it quite as much as Deadbeat. Still a solidly good book. I'm going to give it 4 stars, like the last one. But like a mid-range 4 stars. So that's it for this one. Stay tuned for the rest of the Dresden reviews. Like and subscribe for more book reviews coming thick and quick. I read pretty fast. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, link down below. Don't forget to follow me on Goodreads, link down below. And if it's your jam, join our Sci-Fi Interstellar book club, which is also linked down below. I'll see you soon for the next review. Bye.